Hi, everybody. Thank you for tuning in to our latest COPA broadcast. Today, we're going to be covering what you guys need to do to prepare for the rollover at the end of next week. For people who are new to using COPA, rollover is the process that we go through at the end of every program year to sort of close out of the current school year and open up the new one. We've always do this at the day after Labor Day. It's the first day of CPS school, and we have to do it that way because using an earlier date would mean that 4-year-olds who are going, or 4-year-olds in the system who have turned 5 and are going to kindergarten in September won't be able to continue attending their summer class. Because what happens with the rollover is when we move to the next program year, we add a year to everybody's age in terms of eligibility. So if you had to be 3 by September 1st, 2016 last year to begin a program, now you have to be 3 by September 1st, 2017. And so in order to make sure that the system registers everybody with their new program model, new age, and so on, we start the year over. So I'm going to go through this. I have a presentation here that I'm going to go through fairly quickly just to give everybody a sense of what we're trying to accomplish overall, and then I think I'll go through some of these pieces a little bit on the live site just so you can see how that's going to look when you go in there to do it yourself. You hear me? You don't see me. Okay. Let me try this again. All right, can you see me now? Excellent. All right. So let me go ahead and start that. So there's just some frequently answered questions that everybody is going to ask, so I'm going to go through them before we start. Our current program year ends as of September 3rd, 2017. That is Sunday before Labor Day. And we will begin opening up the system to enroll children for the new program year on September 5th, the Tuesday after Labor Day, when we come back from the long weekend. If experience serves, it will not be available immediately at 9 a.m. By about 10 or 10:15, you should be able to start using the site again. Remember, our partners who host COPA are located in California, so everything happens a little bit later as a result. So we're going to talk about a couple different areas of activity here. We're going to have some pre-rollover actions and some post-rollover actions that need to be accomplished in order to make this work correct. So pre-rollover means things that you can do right now and need to do before September 1st, which is next Friday. Before then, all children and families must be prepared for rollover in the system. This includes deciding which children are aging out of the program and should be archived, which are returning, and whether they return in the same program model or not. So we went over this when we were preparing everyone for the online application. This is the same steps to the same screen. So ideally, everybody would have done this already. Actually, we've got the majority of children processed in this way, but there are about 7,000 kids who haven't been processed. And I'll tell you why, and that number's going up, and I'll tell you why that is in a minute. Post-rollover are things that you cannot do until after we come back from Labor Day weekend. Okay, so since September 1st is that Friday before the weekend. At the end of the day on September 1st, you all are going to be locked out of the system until the next Tuesday. We're going to shut down the system and then end the program year and bring it around for the new one. Everyone has to participate. Every single child has to be processed in order for us to trigger the rollover. So if you don't process your kids, we will do it for you, and you won't like the way that we do it because we're going to send them all to the archive. So anybody who has admin access can complete this process. You need to have an admin user go in and address what's going on with the site and decide the future of these children. Otherwise, it can't be processed. And like I said, we'll do it for you. For those of you who have over income requests for Head Start or early Head Start that you are sending in now, we will, at this time, we're not processing any until after the new program year begins. I know that's frustrating in some cases, but since we're limited to having 10% of the population over income, we don't know what number that's 10% of until we start seeing the new enrollment. So the way you can make that happen quickly is enroll all of your age-eligible children right away, and then we'll see how many spots are available for over-income children. The next piece, where are my kids? That is a good question. They're going to go to where they are set up in the pre-rollover process. And if we do it for you and you don't do it, that means they will be archived. That sounds mean, but the reason we send all the kids to the archive if we don't know where they go is that sites that are closed can't be shut down in the system until we know there are no children associated with it anymore. So we will archive everybody, and then if you come back and say, oh no, we need children, then we can reactivate them. And if no one asks for the kids back, we're going to shut the site down. So that's why it's done that way. Okay. Okay, so here's the next question. What does pre-rollover versus post-rollover mean? So pre-rollover is going through the child next year preparation screen and the family next year preparation screen to make sure that we've decided where all the children are going. Post-rollover activities are setting the start and end dates for your class for 17-18 program year, and starting services are archiving families, depending on what their status is supposed to be. So, the basic pre-rollover instructions, you need to be logged in as an admin user and select the child next year preparation or family next year preparation located in the bottom left-hand side of the screen. Please remember to check the box to the left on the list, or else nothing will happen. Once you check the boxes, click submit. What does that mean? So here is what that screen looks like. This should be familiar to everybody, but we've marked everything here to clarify what we're talking about. So this is, let me show you on the live site, and I'll come back to this. Here on the child next year preparation screen, you'll find your enrolled children list, which is everyone who hasn't had a status assigned yet. Now this process, before we go further, I want to be clear with everybody, this process is to determine the future status of every child who's already enrolled in the system. So this, and by enrolled, I mean they are sitting in a classroom. So if you have children on the waiting list, on the eligible list, on the terminated list, rollover will not affect those children. Nothing will change their status. When you come back after the rollover on September 5th, those children will be in exactly the same place they are. So your waiting list kids will still be on the waiting list. The accepted kids will still be accepted, and so on. The difference will be, the difference will be all the children marked as applicants for next year right now will be marked as applicants for this year after the rollover. And the reason for that is that next year will be this year, because our year doesn't start on January 1st, it starts on September 5th. So that's the only change that will happen to their status. Otherwise, they'll be in the same place they are. And once we arrive at September 5th, those children who had been marked as next year enrollment, and now they'll be this year enrollment, you'll be at the point where you'll be able to put them in the classroom. Okay, so here's a breakdown of that screen. So you can navigate between these. When you set the status for children on the enrolled children list, they will move to another list, and so this list will be 0. And instead, they'll be on the returning list, the recertify list, or the scheduled for archive list. And you can see we've spelled that out here, and I will make this this PowerPoint available to everybody. Probably at the end of the day or tomorrow, we'll get this out to everyone. I just need to add some contact information to the end of it. But that's why we've gone through this and labeled everything specifically, so you can see what we're talking about here. So the returning status, we check the returning radio button and move them to the returning back to eligible list page. That's children who are returning to the program with the same program model. So, for example, if they're PI this year and they're going to be PI next year, means they are not 3. You will put them on the returning list. They're going to come back to the same model that they were in now. The recertify back to waiting list is for children who are enrolled in one program model now and they're coming back, but it won't be the same next year. So they're aging out of say early Head Start, and they're going to come back in Head Start. That's where they go on the certify list. That way, we will set a new program model on the waiting list once the rollover is completed. Children who are not returning. So a lot of times what we're talking about here are your 5-year-olds. If you have turned 5 and are going to kindergarten next year, they should be set to archive. That way they will be out of the database on Tuesday and moved into the archive. Now you have to select the button here, but you also need to check this box in order to make it work. So if you go ahead and say, I want this child sent to the archive, and then you hit submit, but you didn't check the box next to their name, nothing happened. You can see that nothing happened. So this is probably the biggest place where people make an error, is right there. They go through all the process of going down often a big list of names and giving everybody a status, and you didn't check the boxes, so nothing happens to them. So you'll recognize this if you tune into the earlier webinars, because this is how you set your children up for returning. When you mark them as returning and process them by hitting submit here, they were sent here to the returning back to eligible list, and their flag was set as a returning child for the application. And if everybody had done that with all the kids, then there would be nobody left on the enrolled children list. But a number of kids this didn't happen to. Another, here, let me let you look at me for a minute. Another thing that has happened that has made children appear on this list is if there was an enrollment change. So even if they were set as returning, but then they were dropped, they transferred to another site, or they have a new program model. Any new enrollment activity means that their status is gone and they're no longer on the returning list or the archive list, they're back on the enrolled children list. So if you do anything, and I know a number of you at the same time we are asking you to set up for rollover, are also transitioning some program models. Children were in there marked as partner or marked as state pre-K, and we're changing that to show whether or not they're in PFA. So we asked you to change, for example, your child care was pre-K to child care with PFA, something like that. If you're going through that, even if you did this earlier in the year, you need to go back to this page once you're done changing program models and set that again, move them again to the returning list or to the archive list. Otherwise, they don't have that status because it doesn't, every time you enroll or transfer a child, they get added to the enrolled list, no matter where they were previously. Okay. Do we have any questions about that? We've been getting copies of the slides. Yes, we're going to send those out at the end of the day, I hope. All I'm doing is going to add the contact information because I want to make sure that if there are problems that come up, and I don't think there will be, but if there are problems that come up with this process, we want you to get at us the same way through the ticket system. So we're don't have three different people working on the same case. Okay. So notice once you click submit, it will ask you again to set returning flags. This is still an important step because we don't want this process to undermine which children are marked as returning on the application at this point. The next step is to go to families. You have to do it in this order, by the way. You need to do child next year preparation first and family next year preparation second. And this is why. You see you have the choice here to choose either discontinue services or archive. The archive button is usually not available. It's only available for families where all the children are archived or all the children are set up to archive. So you have to do the children first and set those up to archive who need to be set up to archive so that that becomes an option for those parents. You notice that these are your only choices. There's not an option here to continue to receive services. You have to start services again for all of your families. For people who are new, you may wonder why that is, and the answer to that is that in the past, we had families who year after year in the rollover process would be left to continue to receive services, and they'd be on the list of families associated with an agency 2 years, 3 years, 4 years after their children had dropped. So we dropped everybody, and then after the rollover, you need to start services again for those families in your program. This also makes it easier for us as we continue to get requests to move children from one agency to another. If they're no longer receiving services, we can just start services at the new site. So that makes it easier for us. Again, just as with the children, you need to make sure you check the box in the far left-hand column as well as their status before you hit submit. Otherwise, they won't go anywhere. And just like with the children, once you're completed with this process, when you look at the list of all active families, there won't be anybody on this list. It'll be absolutely blank, and it's all the children will have been moved to the list that says ready for update. Yeah. So again, there should be 0 names on your all active families list when you're done. So, other things that you need to do before the rollover occurs. You need to make sure that your August attendance is complete. August and September are really weird months in COPA. So if you're tracking attendance in COPA, you need to go in there and make sure everything is okay on August or on September 1st, which is the Friday before the rollover. If you don't do that, there is a danger, because the way that COPA works, you can only make changes during the current program year, and the current program year will begin September 5th. So if you look back and the first or second week of September and say, oh, you know, I had a child that started August 29th and I didn't put them in there, can you open the system back up and put them in? The answer is going to be no. Once we get to September 5th, you will not be able to make enrollment changes in COPA dated earlier than that. So that means if you are billing for childcare for September, the only date you can edit anything at all with regards to September 1st is on September 1st. Once you get to September 5th, September 1st will be this month, but last year. So make sure you do that. There is no way to edit enrollment, to change program models, to do anything like that for previous school year. Okay, so that's the pre-rollover process. It's pretty simple, and many of you are half done because you've already set up your children. Okay, now I have some great questions. We are a PFA site with delegate agency partnership too. What program model should be used for Head Start and Early Head Start enrollees? So we are working on getting all of that set up today. We want to move away from the delegate agency partner model to a model that says either Head Start collaboration with certificate and PFA, for example, if you have all of those funding from us for Head Start, funding for Action for Children, funding from PFA. If you don't have PFA, you wouldn't use it. So we need a program model that tells us whether you're receiving all of the variable funding sources you can receive. So I'm working on getting, by the end of the day today, making sure that we have all of the required program models. The ones that were missing were Early Head Start, center-based, and prevention initiative. So for some Early Head Start partners, we did not have that option available. We should do that. We should have that by the end of the day today or the beginning of tomorrow. And so you should be able to set those up. If you have an Early Head Start delegate agency partner program model right now, let's just take a look at this. Well, if you have an Early Head Start and prevention or Early Head Start child care partnership or Early Head Start delegate agency partner program model right now, you need it to have one that reflects prevention initiative for next year. What you should do today at this point is when you go into the rollover section, you should set them up as, let me get to this, as not as returning, but as I have stuff blocking my screen that you don't see, so hold on. You would set them up as recertify. So they have one program model right now, but when they come back after the rollover, you can put them in with the new program model because that's changing. So next year, we don't want anybody listed as delegate agency partner because that doesn't give us all the information we have. Currently, that model applied to both children with preschool for all funding and children without it. So we want to fix that and make sure we can get a head count of exactly who's enrolled in PFA or PI. Okay. Also, for those of us who are our own grantee for Early Head Start and now merging with DFSS, what does rollover look like? So right now, we don't have models in here that identify that you have Early Head Start that is not from us. So we've been using just identifying the other funding sources in the program model. So we would say child care or certificate with PFA or PI, something like that. But we would lay it out without the Early Head Start because right now giving them an Early Head Start program model will map them to our PIR, and we don't want them on our PIR because they're not our kids, or they are, to be more complicated about it, but not according to HHS. So what we're going to do is just list the other funding sources right now, and at some point in the future we will be, and not very far in the future, some point in the next, this fall, early winter, we will be able to add additional mapping into the system that lets us identify this is an Early Head Start child, it's just not ours. If you're a PFA 10-month program that starts September 5th, so we shouldn't be doing attendance for August. That, yes. I would advise that. I would advise waiting until September 5th to enroll them. It is possible to enroll the kids today and take attendance and then set them up for rollover and start the program year again next year. We don't like our Head Start people doing that because an enrollment this year will place them on the PIR for 16-17. But for PFA, it's not going to work like that. However, the way the system logic works, it's still going to identify anyone that enrolled in August as a second-year child come September 5th. So we don't. At this point, I would concentrate on getting everybody in there, identifying with the right place, and then we can put them in the classroom on September 5th rather than doing it twice. What if the children were pre-enrolled over and put on the returning list, but the program model and option needs to be changed? How do we do that? That's a good question. You can, I think we'll have to deal with that in some of these cases after the rollover, because we can still, when they're rolled over onto the eligible list, we can still bring them back into the waiting list and change the program model. You could go to the pre-enrolled list and put them back on the waiting list and fix it and move it back over. But again, that will mean you'll have to start through the process of marking them as returning and so on again. So I guess that's up to you. If you have questions about it and aren't sure how you would do that, I would leave it until September 5th. Program model option questions. What do we use for the new program formerly known as half day? But now that program has 6+ hours and 180 days of service. So that's an interesting question because we have a program model in there that previously has only been used at CPS that's called Head Start Full Day. And Head Start Full Day means 6 or 7 hours a school day of service, basically, 10 months typically, and not paired with childcare. So the answer to your question is, if you have a 6+ hours, it's not really the same program as half day because it's not double session, but says it's uncollaborated. We're going to go ahead and use Head Start full day as that, and understanding that full day, just as it did when that was a CPS program model, means full school day, 6.5 hours, maybe 7 hours. It does not actually mean an 8 to 6. A child enrolled in a program from 8 to 6 should not be identified as Head Start full day. That's whether they have eligibility or not, that's a collaborated program model, or classroom at any rate. So you would set it that way to make the distinction. Or home-based. So here's the thing. A question about people who have their kids in their own COPA versus ours. I mean, you need to do whatever you did before with your own COPA. If you don't have any children enrolled right now, like if they're on the eligible list or if they're on the waiting list, but nobody is enrolled in the classroom, you don't need to do any of the pre-rollover work. You still will need to do the post-rollover stuff, which I'm coming to in a moment. But if there's nobody on your enrolled children list, there's nothing for you to do before the rollover. Okay. And also for program model and option, are we distinguishing for child care funding between certificate AFC, site administered, and DCFS as separate funding sources? We don't have those in there right now, and that's not going to change in the next 2 weeks. Right now, our child care distinction are between what we have labeled as child care, which means they're funded by DFSS, and other child care funding sources. We can look at that if that's something that people need. Going forward, we can look at distinguishing between non-DFSS site-administered contracts, Action for Children, and DCFS funding. We used to have DCFS funding models in there, but we haven't kept up with every permutation of that because DFSS directly hasn't been using those in a long time. Okay, who do we speak to about making sure the program models we choose are the correct ones, especially when we have a partner that is a Head Start partner and receives PFA or PI? So this is the reason why when we set up the application and brought everybody into COPA with new sites several months ago, we asked to have a site level user for every site, rather than having a central office continuing to put information in. And that is, the way that I find out who's got different funding sources, quite frankly, is I look in COPA and I look at their program model. So if you're asking, we can talk it through with you and try to figure out what model they have. But if you're asking me what program model to use, I have to come back to you and ask you, who funds this child? The program model needs to reflect the funding sources for the child. So if the person doing the enrollment does not know the funding sources for the child, you've got the wrong person doing the enrollment. Somebody who knows who pays for the child has to be picking the program model. And so if you may look at that and realize that somebody at the wrong level, the wrong person at the agency has admin access, you'll need to create an admin user for somebody who knows who's paying for these children. Yeah, so the goal is to get everybody on the enrollment list is the question. Actually, the goal is to get everyone off the enrollment list. So that list is 0, and everyone who was there is on either the returning list, the recertify list, or the scheduled for archive list. Should home base newly enroll in DFSS COPA or not? Yes. If there's no enrollment now, though, I would do the enrollment on September 5th, and you're going to see why in just a minute, because I'm going to do the post-rollover activities that need to happen. And they need to happen whether anybody was enrolled in August or not. Okay, should we select recertify for the children currently under state pre-K that need to be changed to PFA? That's a question that we'll really get to because you'll get some information about this afterwards. I would change those kids right now and not wait to change the program models until afterwards. So you need to change them, I would say, with a date. So backdate the whole process, terminate them, waitlist them, and re-enroll them with a date of August 1st, and make sure that they have the new program model for August. And that does mean you'll have to put the attendance back in. But here's the reason I say this. If you're billing us for childcare, and I know that you are, person who asked the question, excuse me, if you're billing us for childcare, your activity number is going to be tied to your new program model for September. And that means if you don't have the right program model on September 1st, that date won't be included on the billing, and there will be no way to change it because you cannot change the program model on September 1st after the rollover. So you need to do that now to make certain that you've got the right date for September. Otherwise, your billing month for September is going to start on September 5th, and you'll lose that day for anybody who didn't get the right program model. Will all of the help tickets regarding problems with enrollment be resolved by September 1st, 2017? We got some additional people working on those, and we are working through them. We got, I would say, what is that, 17%, 18% of them done over the last few days. Mostly, if they're not, then they'll be done very shortly afterwards. We're working through all of those duplicate enrollment tickets as we speak. We expect to get the bulk of them done over the next week, I would say. Okay, so I'm going to go on to the post-rollover section. Okay, so basic post-rollover instructions. So this is not something you can do in advance. After the rollover, you'll come in on September 5th, and the site, well, most likely you won't be able to log in for a little bit. But sometime around, let's say, 10 o'clock in the morning, everyone will be back in the site. We'll have tested to make sure that the rollover has happened successfully. So we need an admin user to log in and go to admin. And then they'll go to the Universal Class Start and Update page and set the start and end dates for all of your classes. Now, the vast majority of cases, the start date will be September 5th. The end date, it depends on whether you're a year-round program or a 10-month program. And if the start date, if you're not a year-round program, then your end date is the last day of class. Once you get in there and start taking attendance and so on, you can't change the start date, but you will be able to move the end date around if you get it wrong, as long as the end date is in the future. And then you'll also need to select a teacher and assistant teacher in there. If they're not listed, If they're not in a human resources section, you need to go and put them in. We did that webinar a couple of weeks ago. That should be posted. And people should be calling all the time and finding out who's doing that, who needs help logging in, and so on. So you'll be hearing from us on that topic soon. And then also on the admin tab, like we said, we ended services for the program year for all families. So for those that are returning, you can go to the Start Services Archive Family link and set them up en masse. Okay, so this is what the universal class start end date looks like. Notice it's got the start and end dates for the sites at the top. This is where it defaults to, but this is just the program year. So for this year, it was 9/5 through 9/3. And any dates you set up as your class start and end date will be within these. So you can't have one that starts before Monday, September 4th, or what happened here? After Sunday, September 2nd, 2018. But any dates within there you can put in here. So so that means you typically would start with the first day possible, but the class end date will be whatever the end date is. So in this case, you see they used June 30th. These are, of course, 2017 dates because we haven't rolled over yet, so we can't set up a 2018 date to show you. Now you see over here there is a section that's got the teachers, assistant teachers that you can set up. If you put them into human resources, they'll show up on this drop-down menu. Now, if you've already selected them, they're already set up now, it should carry over the rollover. But if you haven't assigned a teacher or assistant teacher, you can do it all at once. If you put them in HR, you can do it all at once after the rollover from the screen. As for the families, you just need to have dates. So we're looking at the status of not receiving services, and you can check the box next to all of them. If these are all families on the list, you did your rollover correctly, and you've got all families that you want to return, you can check the box at the top and hit Start Services, and it will start them as of today's date. So let me take you there. So these are the post-rollover activity. You see it here, the start and end dates. For the kids not receiving services, it wants to start date. It defaults to today's date. You can check this box, pick everybody. If somebody didn't come back, you can uncheck them, and then hit Start Services, and it will all be started on this date, so you don't need to go into every individual file and do it. As for the other screen, Universal Class Start and Update, see, it's got a list of our classrooms at this site. You can, if you've got anybody here, I don't have anybody in HR though, because this isn't a real site. But you pick your teacher, pick your assistant teacher, and you set whatever start and end date. If it's the same for the entire site, you can go up here in the upper left-hand corner, put in a date, and then you can hit Apply All, and it will fill all of these with the same start and end date, and you can go through and select them. Or you can go in here and individually pick the start date and the end date based on the different classrooms. Looking at questions. If children are collaboratively funded by EHS, Action for Children, and PI, do these children have to be enrolled in COPA? Yes, they do. Any child that's not enrolled won't show up. However, if you are in somebody else's, either your own early Head Start grant or Head Start or early Head Start grantee that is not the FSS, when you enroll the child in COPA right now, you will not indicate early Head Start. So if you're funded by Early Head Start Action for Children and Prevention Initiative, your program model is just going to be Certificate in Prevention Initiative. I'm not sure which order it's in, but it won't list Early Head Start. Because if you list somebody with Early Head Start, it looks like it's being charged to our grant. So if it's from a grant that's not ours, at this point, we don't have a way to record Early Head Start in there. So the program model should just show the other program funders. We will work on getting some way to indicate that the Early Head Start in there over the next year. Okay. What's the process for a parent that has completed a universal application with an agency but now wants to transfer a child to our agency? You need to start a ticket with us. It matters whether they want to enroll for next program year or they're trying to enroll now. So either start a ticket or update the existing ticket in their system to indicate that we need to be enrolled now if that's the case, because obviously we can't make changes to that after the rollover, so we need to get them in now. So that would be an urgent case. For kids that are enrolling next year, as I said, we're working on that. We're hoping to get through these cases by the end of next week before the rollover, but we can't put a rush on any particular case before that if their enrollment date isn't going to be until September 5th. You need to update that and let us know that you need them in there now. Their enrollment date is supposed to be today. Okay, so should we use 9-4 or 9-5 as the start date? 9-4, I guess, is going to be the program year start date, but almost everybody is closed on that date. So the only reason you would use 9-4 as the start date is because you're not closed and you need to take attendance for that date. Otherwise, you just start them on the 5th. Okay, if we are moving towards using DFSS COPA instead of our own COPA, who will create the classrooms needed and by when? We went over that in an earlier webinar. We have instructions out there for how to add and set up a classroom. We wouldn't be setting up the classrooms from here, because we don't actually know what classrooms we have. The way we find out is to look in COPA. So admin user at the site level needs to add the classes so that we can see them. Otherwise, we don't know that they're there. Again, those are posted somewhere. We'll be sending out, when we send out information about where this is posted, the other ones are in the same place. How do you enroll a child in your PI program when the family already has a COPA ID with a child enrolled in Head Start at another site? Again, you're going to need to start a ticket through that process and indicate that you need to enroll them now. If that's the case, then we will try to process that. The trick is that the real reason or how to enroll them is we are going to add another child. That's why we'll be asking when we ask you to fill out a ticket. If there are specific things we're going to ask for the birth date, age, some other pieces of information. Because we're going to create a separate child file at the new site, but it will be attached to the same parent file. We had a big discussion about this morning at a meeting, actually. We need to make sure that in any cases where there's a child care involved, that we have all of the children attached to the same shared parent file. This avoids a parent being charged child care for more than one, or charged a child care co-payment by more than one agency. We are a private school, and our first day of school was yesterday when we submitted a ticket for a new student who just enrolled last week. Do we have them enrolled for next year or this year, because they technically started school already? We can't, when an applicant is an applicant for next year, they can get as far as the waiting list, maybe even the eligible list, but we can't enroll them. So somebody has to be classified as a this year enrollment in order to be enrolled. Now, you don't have to go in and change everybody if you wait until September 5th, because the rollover will take all the kids marked next year and change that status to this year, because next year will be here. Okay. So what happens if my child is on the wrong list? So if you put somebody, for example, on the returning list and you really wanted them on the certified list, you can go look at the correct list and move them back and then set them up again. So you just put them back to the enrolled children list. This is after rollover, they're asking. So sometimes this happens. Sometimes a child is moved to eligible waiting list, and that's not where you wanted them. Though you just need to make sure you don't roll the dates forward so you can't go back. If a child is in the eligible accepted list, you can move them to the ineligible list, and then from there move them back to the waiting list. The other mistake that's made is if they are they vanish, you can't find the children at all. They're probably gone to archive, so you need to search the archive. The regular child search won't help you find that. So let me show you that piece live. So for right now, these children are on the eligible accepted. If that was a mistake and you want to get them back to the waiting list, you need to move them to ineligible first, and then from the ineligible list, put them on the waiting list. So you do that, make them ineligible. And so you've got a chance to correct a date. If you wanted to do this in the past, you can move it back. You can't do that, however, for a date this program year if you're doing this on September 5th. So I'm moving them in eligible, Now I'm on the ineligible list, and I can move them back to the eligibility waiting list. Okay. So I have a couple other points I think I touched on that I want to come back around and stress again to make sure that everybody's kind of on the same page with this stuff going forward. First of all, the thing to remember is that the new program year starts on September 5th, and once we reach that point, you won't be able to make enrollment status changes to the current program year. We've shut the year down and put it away and start a new enrollment year. And then we move forward from there. This means that September 1st is part of this year. It's not part of next year. So you need to, before you leave on September 1st, you got to make sure that children should be enrolled or enrolled, they're in the right classroom, they have the right program model, and so on. So we will probably kick everyone out of COPA sometime around 3:30, 4 o'clock on that date. So you want to make sure you just get all that stuff done in the morning. The next thing that I want everybody to be aware of, again, because this is really going to be the 2017-18 program year and consolidation will be in full force, we don't want anybody using a Head Start Delegate Agency Partner program model in September. We're discontinuing that. We have that model because that meant this child receives Head Start from DFSS, and we don't know what else they receive. But now we need to know. Specifically, we need to know whether they receive Preschool for All funding or not, because now we're responsible for tracking and reporting on that as well. So we'll be checking in with everybody that first and second week of September. Be aware, we really need to mark who's in PFA or PI, and if that's not identified, if they're not enrolled in a COPA classroom with that program model in September, they're not enrolled, and we won't count them as enrolled, and you can't get paid. So it absolutely has to happen to get in the system as soon as possible, and definitely during September. The child is over income that qualifies for PFA and IDHS childcare. Which program model is used? Well, you don't use Head Start as part of it. The program model that fits the sources, I'll send out more information about the program model and option pairings, but here's essentially what's going on probably. The program options that say things like center-based, full day, part year, 5-day, what have you, are Head Start program options. So if the child is just PFA and IDHS childcare, the program option is going to be either PFA or certificate or childcare or no Head Start funding. You can try those, but it's not going to be a specific one that says center-based 5-day, full day, or something like that. Those are only used right now for Head Start because we have a number of reports that include or exclude children based on their program option. So if you're not enrolling them in Head Start, they come off of certain reports. So for the rollover, all children should be moved off the enrolled, pre-enrolled, and eligible waiting lists and moved to the turn-in list. No, not necessarily. If they're not enrolled now, if they're on the eligible waiting list or the pre-enrolled list, nothing's going to happen. You don't need to process them for pre-rollover stuff. So let me show you this. So here are kids that are currently enrolled in the eligible, or not enrolled, they're on the eligible waiting list. They'll still be on the waiting list after rollover. Nothing is going to happen to them. It's the children that are enrolled in a classroom that will need to be processed. So if you look in the system under admin, you go to child next to preparation. This defaults, you've got this enrolled children list. These are the kids who enrolled in a classroom, but nothing has happened. They need to move them off of this list, and they need to be on this list. Back to eligible list, this list, the waiting list, or this list, the archive. Children who are on the eligible list, who are on the waiting list, or who are in archive won't move, they'll stay there. But all the children who are enrolled in a classroom are going to be moved to one of those places. The enrollment throughout the system, when we open the system on September 5th, our total enrollment is going to be 0. And children need to be then enrolled in the classrooms to get a track of them. You'll be able to place the kids that are marked as returning in a classroom. The kids marked as archive will be gone. They'll be in the archive. Okay, who can we call with questions rather than a ticket to get things done quicker? Unfortunately, everybody would like that. We have requests for help from many, many people. We have a very small team to be working on them. There's not really a way to jump the line. And I'm sorry about that. We're working on getting the system better. Part of the things that everybody can do to make it quicker, if you've got a ticket in place, you can go through a link and update an existing ticket. Please do that. Don't start another one. Don't start a ticket and also call the help desk and also call Cinta. Then we've got to process and touch that case several times in several different ways. If you are calling somebody about a case that is already a ticket about, please include the ticket number. Let us know if there. Otherwise, we can resolve it and we'll waste time having someone else trying to resolve the same case because we don't know it's resolved. That's part of what takes so long. For the program model where children are in Head Start and PFA, what program model should we use? That sounds pretty clearly like Head Start and PFA. There will be several. It'll be Head Start, depending on whether you have child care or not. It'll be Head Start. It'll be just Head Start and PFA, or Head Start collaboration with child care and PFA, or Head Start with certificate and PFA. It just depends on what the other funding source is. Okay. For students who are PI center-based this year but are moving up to pre-K on 9-5, at what point do we change the program model? So that's a great question. What we would do with those kids is we would mark them here as recertify back to waiting list. And then once the rollover happens on September 5th, they will be on the waiting list. And the waiting list is where it allows you to change the program model. So at what point you do that is on September 5th, go in, change the program model to the new program model, and then enroll them in the class with the new program model. What program model should we use for partner sites? It depends on what their funding source is. If they receive Preschool for All, they need to be one that says Head Start with Preschool for All. If it doesn't, it just needs to say Head Start, and then it either has child care. If you're using partner, it wasn't child care for us, but it was either, it's almost certainly Head Start collaboration with certificate. Meaning Head Start, or meaning child care funding that's not ours. If it's Head Start only full day, and there are no other funding sources, I guess you would call them just Head Start full day, but I doubt that's the case. In most cases, these kids at child care delegate agency partners are either receiving preschool for all or certificate or both. But if you don't know that, I certainly don't know that. The person to ask is then the owner or director of the partner site, who should know where the money is coming from. But again, if for them to continue to receive PFA funding, it has to be identified as a PFA child in the program model. Again, a lot of questions about program models. I just want to take a step back. We'll send out some more information along with this, but it's not going to be what you want, I'm afraid. So let me try to explain something that's kind of key to the way the whole program model module works. We use the program model to figure out a number of things about children for reporting purposes. We want to figure out if they're 10 months or full year. We want to figure out who pays for them, if they're receiving child care, if they're receiving preschool for all money, if they're receiving money from our Head Start or Early Head Start grants. This means that there isn't a correct program model for a classroom. There is a correct program model for a child. It is a child level indicator, and so not everyone in the same classroom necessarily will have the same program model. And that's why it's kind of difficult to answer the question when people ask me, what program model should I use? So let's say you have, and this is going to get worse, not worse, this is going to get more complicated as we go through the enrollment reduction for Head Start. So let's say you had a classroom, it's a preschool for all funded classroom. Some of the kids are also Head Start eligible, but not all of them. So there's 20 kids in this classroom, and the classroom has kids funded by Action for Children, but not everybody has eligibility. And it has children funded by Head Start, but not everybody has eligibility, and they're funded by Preschool for All. So you may have, out of the 20 kids, you may have 12 children who are Head Start eligible. All of them have Preschool for All, and let's say several of them also have Action for Children childcare, which we put in there as a certificate. So they don't all have the same program model. You'll have those kids Head Start collaboration with certificate and PFA. You'll have some kids that are just Head Start and PFA. You'll have some kids that are just certificate and PFA. So the whole room is not on the same program model. It depends on which children are being funded by which program. And so it's not a classroom level feature. It's a child level feature. So we are going to have to get to a new mindset where we understand we're looking at how the children are funded in fine grain. Somebody said, I didn't realize PFA full day was for Head Start only. It's not. I'm not sure what I said that communicated that. PFA full day means they're in a Preschool for All room for a full day, which is almost everybody. I think there's only one community-based organization with half-day PFA. The rest of them are full day. What I said is a program option that says center-based 5-day, full year is only paired with Head Start program model. If PFA full day is your program model, your program option will be just PFA. If you try to set different other program options than that, if you try to set center-based 5-day, center-based 4-day, things like that, it's going to tell you they're not compatible. To a certain extent, I'm sorry to say that it's just because there's so many combinations, there's a little bit of trial and error on the program option. So for programs as a child with Head Start and Preschool for All and child care, what is the model to use? That's it. There's one here. Let me just look at a list for you. Open this up. So there are a huge number of options available. That's why it's difficult to really talk about them. Here we have Head Start collaboration with Child Care and PFA. That's the model that says you're getting Head Start from us, Child Care from us, and Preschool for All. Those are all us, actually. So that's a child with lots of funding from DFSS. Now you've got Head Start with certificate in PFA. That means that child care funding is not from us. And the differentiation there is just you can't bill us for child care with a certificate program model because you're billing someone else, Action for Children, or you're billing directly or what have you. So that's why those are the different models there. So for partner sites, we do not need to identify their partners. They just need to put in Head Start and PFA. Yes, that's correct. It doesn't matter that they're partners anymore. That doesn't need to be identified as part of their model. We're just continuing that distinction. Program model for the children, so the change before rollover or after rollover. This depends on whether they're receiving child care is the complicated answer. If you want to bill for child care for September, you've got to be right on September 1st. Also, if they are enrolled and they're aging out, so if they're moving from a PI classroom or a early Head Start classroom and they're moving into a 3 to 5 year old classroom, you can't have them in a 3 to 5 year old classroom with a birth to 3 year old program model. So at the time that you're transferring them into a new room, you need to change the program model at that point. Otherwise, if they are still in the, say, a PI room this week, and September 5th they're going to start in a 3 to 5 year old room, you would change it at that point. So it depends. I know that's an answer that you don't want to hear, but it does. Okay, another, if they're partnership and receiving both, what will be the program model? If you really, really can't figure this out, you need to contact me offline and we can help you. And we can talk through what their funding sources are, but their funding sources need to be reflected in the program model. If they receive Preschool for All, it's got to say Preschool for All in there. If they don't, it shouldn't say that. So it depends on who's funding. It's got to be accurate. That means it might not be the same for all the kids, or for even for all the kids in the same classroom, which is why you cannot ask me that and have me give you one right now. I can't. It's more complicated than that. We need to make sure that the funding sources are correctly identified. So it shouldn't be missing a funding source that they receive unless it's Head Start and Early Head Start, and that's not from me because, or from DFSS, because then you'll go on our reporting and that will be a mess. Head Start collaboration eventually is not used when we have child care and PFA. Yes, it's got to be accurate. So if you've got child care and PFA that's the one that you pick. Some people have been with us a while. There are not a lot of changes that are going to be made. The big change that's happened for long-time COPA users is that we're changing the pre-K model to PFA. And if you are doing that, if you have models that are identified as pre-K, somebody's asking again, I said this before, and so I'm going to reiterate that you need to change them now and backdate it to the 1st of this month. And then we're going to change your activity number from pre-K to PFA. We're phasing that out. The reason it's got to be done before rollover is because September 1st is before rollover and September 5th is after rollover. And so if you want to bill for September, you need to have the same program model on the 1st as you do on the 5th. And that's really for people who are billing DFSS for childcare. You need to make sure that that transition is made now. You're asking for a chart. I am going to send out some information on it. Again, you probably won't be happy with it. We have, at last count, 87 program models, and we're going to add some more. So we cannot game out all of those on a piece of paper. There is some critical thinking that is involved in deciding what program model you're using, and that is based on who is paying for the child. Again, for clarity, is there a program model for a child that receives Action for Children and PFA? Yes, there is. It's called Certificate MPI or Certificate MPFA. Can you eliminate the choices that include pre-K? Yes, we can, and we have. You can see them if they're grandfathered in. So if they already had the pre-K program model, it still says that until you change it. Otherwise, they would have no option. But you cannot pick it off the menu anymore. So if you try to set state pre-K as a program model, it won't work. That's been shut down already. So you can't pick that by accident. The only reason children are in there identified as state pre-K is that they already were identified that way, and we can't turn it off for the children that already have it, because then they would not have a program model at all, and that would be a problem because they wouldn't show as enrolled anywhere. So that's what's going on with those guys. But again, we did turn it off. So if you look at the new list, I believe, let me look at it right here. Can I still pick one? In some cases, I can still pick it, but can I? So I can. So we didn't turn them off the way that I hoped they would. Thanks for pointing that out. I will be turning that off. We turned a lot of these off, but not all of them. So, you keep wanting this information. So agencies with their own grantee for early Head Start home-based will manually put it in our COPA. I don't have the answer to that, actually, because we are not pairing prevention initiative funding with early Head Start funding that I'm aware of. So if you've got your home-based classes that are, or home-based groups that are totally separate from DFSS funding, I'll have to get back to you offline. Somebody's telling you to put them in, it's not actually me. So I'll figure out what the policy is on that. I know when we have children who are non-DFSS funded, But at sites where we have children in classrooms, we are asking to have everybody enrolled so we can get an eye on total capacity. But I don't know about home-based services that are not funded by DFSS. So I'll get back to you on that. So I'm going to sign out of the live site here so I can show you, because people are asking, well, you keep saying to start a ticket. How do I start a ticket? So it's down here at the bottom of the front page of COPA. This is just when you go to cys.mycopa.com. You see this terming page down at the bottom. It says Universal Application Help Desk. So you have two choices here, which is worded a little more clearly. But here, if you already started a ticket, you can search for your existing ticket and update it rather than, let me make up a number, see if this even works. I don't know if this is, here we go, see? Yeah, and so then you can edit your existing ticket. Can we go in here as well? So more information is being prepared to be sent out to you on this as we speak. I'm sitting in here and somebody's doing this somewhere else. But the idea is keep track of your ticket number, and if you contact us subsequently, have that available to us so that we don't have people spending their time trying to address an issue that's already been addressed. Okay. Here's a good one. Can we just update the program model under the child's program information, or we still need to terminate and put them back on the waiting list and update the program model and enroll them back into class? You cannot just change the program model. You're not supposed to be able to change the program model unless they're on the waiting list. And if you can, it's a bug. But here's the reason you won't do that. If you update it in the system without giving them a new start date, it's going to backdate their program model change to their last enrollment date. And that's a problem if you are billing for childcare. Okay? So if you already billed for July and they had one program model in there, and then you just change the model rather than dropping them and giving them a new start date with a different program model, your July billing is now wrong. And so if you ever try to edit or update it, the child will show as not having the model that they had when you billed, and that will be a big problem for you. So you don't want to do that. You never want to change a program model with childcare attached in the previous month, because the billing records will not match the COPA history, and that's a problem. So you just don't want to do that. Is this correct? Certificate is Action for Children, and childcare is funded through DFSS. That's correct. You get a gold star. Yeah, Certificate is Action for Children, and childcare is from DFSS. Actually, if you're from a third or fourth source, right now it's also Certificate, because we don't have a different source of childcare in the system. We're gradually customizing COPA as we go along here. We're asking for a larger number of funding streams to be added to the site as the site is updated. We get the possibility to enter a bigger number of funding streams in there. We can get more fine-grained in how we break them up. So that's what we're going to be doing. And so we have to go back and change students' program models to match the new categories recently created. So this is related to the question that I just asked. We need to change them to reflect all of their funding sources if it wasn't possible to do that accurately before. However, when we say go back, we're not going to go back very far. So any changes that you make right now in terms of program models should not predate August 1st. So you can set the date back, and we log in again. That's not going to work. Okay. No. I'm going to pick a child here. So if I were going to drop a child to change the program model, I would hit terminate. I can pick a date in the past, so it doesn't have to be done today. I can do this as of August 1st, but we don't want to do it before then because we'll start, we don't want to change anything that happened in July since we already have enrollment reports, attendance reports, and so on that are generated for July. So we're more or less closed the books on last month, and we don't want to mess with it. So we're still working on August. I would change everybody as of August 1st. Just in case you have child care billing, you can get the whole month in under the same number. Okay. So that's really all I have for you today. It's not all that complicated, especially not right now. You need to make sure, again, that all the children are set up with their destination for next year. So they're either returning with the same program model. You're going to recertify if they need a new model, if they're moving from birth to 3 to 5-year-old. Or if they are aging out of the program, or you know that they're not returning for some other reason, you can mark them as terminate or as archive, and then we'll go to the archive. And the same thing goes for the family. They're either returning or they're going to the archive. Once that's set up, everything else, for the most part, is coming in September. So we'll send you out a little bit more information. I'm going to have this webinar posted. The link will be sent out. I don't have it with me. The other piece is the PowerPoint as well is going to be sent out to everybody. And I've got a document that kind of explains how program models work and the different funding sources, but we can't really do a grid with all 100 of them. And I said there's 87, but we're going to try to put some more in this afternoon or first thing tomorrow, and then we will be at 100. So take a look at that when we send it out. If you need help, you can contact us, and we can talk you through that. But we are going to need some information on that. You'll have to tell us who's paying for the kid, because that's one of the biggest things that the program model tries to address. So I hope this goes pretty smoothly. Really, we're way ahead of where we usually are because, as I said, when we started, we've got about 7,000 children who haven't been processed in the next year preparation, so they're enrolled, but we don't know whether they're returning or not. But normally at this time of year, that number is 19,000, 20,000. So that's a big drop, and that's because most sites set them up for last year when we asked earlier in the summer, and then the only reason the number is climbing back is when program models are changed or new children are enrolled, they go to the enrolled children list until they're processed. So we had it down, I think, below 5,000 at one point. It's crept back up to 7,000, but it's still a much smaller task than it is most years. So kids that you already set up and flagged as returning and don't appear on the enrolled children list, they're fine. They're great. You don't have to do anything at all until after September 5th. So that's good news. So anyway, thank you for joining me today. We'll get this webinar. It's still recording. I'll get it processed and posted as soon as we can. And I'll talk to you guys later. I've got one more. If I'm trying to get a ticket, my site doesn't appear on the list. If it doesn't, make sure your agency does, but put your contact information in the comments so we can find you, since you won't be listed that way. We have a couple that aren't in Caspio, Caspio being the program that we did tickets for, but we are working on that as well. So have a great day, and we'll be in touch over the next week.